Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Autosaving the Day, episode 4, right?
Yeah.
That means we've been doing it for a month now.
Nice.
How fun. Anyway, this is the podcast dedicated to bringing superheroes to action by the power of video games. My name is Diego, and with me today are my partners in crime fighting, Josh from Panels to Pixels.
Hello. Nice to be here.
Nice to
I
have
thought
you
I
here.
would say something wittier then, but nothing came.
And Xavier, also known as Godzilla Mendoza.
Howdy.
Good to have you guys here today.
Yeah,
Today,
it's good to be here.
Good to have you guys here. Today, we're going to space, fellas.
Oh, man. Did you know that no one can hear you scream there?
That's right. It's a scary place to be.
Also, no one can hear you playing 80s show tunes.
So, of course, we're talking about the Guardians of the Galaxy. And last week, we pitched you Daredevil. So this week, we'll be pitching you the Guardians of the Galaxy game. That's it's been rumored for quite a while. And we've had the Telltale one. But there's been another, I don't know if it's rumored or has it been confirmed that it's in development, supposedly published by Square Enix as well.
It was reported by Eurogamer, and it was part of the multi-title deal between Marvel and Square Enix, or Enix, and supposed to be being developed by Eidos Montreal.
Right, and that's been quite a while now, right?
That was at the same time as the Avengers project.
Oh, wow.
Shortly after, yeah.
And I mean, for the Avengers, we at least got that one teaser trailer and little like tweets here and there reassuring you that it's still happening. But we haven't really gotten anything about this Guardians of the Galaxy game.
No, we don't even know if it's still happening.
Right. So it's kind of that makes me wonder. Now I realize now that both the Avengers project and this Guardians of the Galaxy game being part of that multi game deal with Square Enix kind of makes me wonder if those games are going to be part of the same universe. Maybe not necessarily. We always bring up, should these games be all in the same universe with including Spider-Man PS4 and last week Daredevil saying if it should be part of the of all the same universe. But it makes me hearing that both of these, the Avengers and the Guardians, are under Square Enix, it makes me feel like there's maybe an actual possibility that these games could be set in the same universe. What do you guys think?
Well, because it's a very different case when you have two games like by the same publisher or developer, because we know that there's so much animosity between like cross-platform stuff that you can guarantee that Ultimate Alliance 3 is not going to have much crossover with Spider-Man PS4 or whatever. But I could definitely see both of those projects having some kind of, that's also the other thing is if they're both by Square Enix, Avengers and Guardians are two properties that just already kind of mesh very well.
Right.
As we've seen in the films, they just kind of bumped into each other in the last movie, and it was the most natural thing in the world. It's like they've been hanging out for decades already. So I think that is the most reasonable and down to earth kind of crossover they could possibly do. It's not like Spider-Man hanging out with the Guardians or something weirder it's another example. Oh yeah, the X-Men hanging out with the Avengers. That's just something you don't see anymore.
Yeah, so, especially with Spider-Man being the more street level hero, at least with the one that we got in Spider-Man PS4. And I mean, you'd imagine with you got a game that's where you play as the Avengers. It doesn't necessarily mean that they would have to take on a cosmic threat, as we've been seeing in the movies. I think there's a possibility that the Avengers game doesn't necessarily need a big, huge threat like Thanos or a cosmic villain. But I mean, you would imagine that that's a pretty high possibility. And the Guardians
usually
being
like
in that environment.
The biggest kind of villains are the cosmic ones, because that's just the nature of the Marvel universe, is just this big scaling problem. It's like, how do we make something that's like a genuine threat to these like 15 superheroes who can all lift mountains? All right, well, here's a guy who can just blow up planets by staring at them, you know? So I definitely think it'll have to be one of those kinds of villains, because like they're just not pushing any of the more grounded ones, like Doctor Doom or like Ultron or like any of the like Earth level big bads are just getting so ignored lately, you know?
Yeah.
And there has to be synchronicity with the MCU.
Right.
So
Yeah.
because that's pushing the cosmic threats so hard, it'll probably end up being one of those.
I would love to see Doctor Doom make a comeback.
Oh yeah.
So
Can you imagine like if they like worked in some of that like sinister Iron Man stuff?
So apart from this rumored Guardians of the Galaxy game, we do have an actual Guardians of the Galaxy game, the Telltale game that came out. Was that also around 2 years ago? Maybe a year and a half?
I mean, it feels like forever, honestly. It's kind of weird.
2017, I think.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Any of you guys played that one?
I played the first episode.
I haven't played any of it, so I'll leave that open to you too.
In terms of like, you know, having only played the first episode, it's not top tier Telltale, you know, level. It's not Walking Dead or
it's no Wolf
even
Among
Batman.
Us.
Exactly.
Right. Rest in peace, Wolf Among Us season 2.
I'm so sad.
Yeah.
Oh, I made myself sad by bringing that up.
Yeah, I remember it every now and then, and it depresses me. Now I'm going to be depressed for the rest of the night. That, and whenever I think of like Silent Hills cancellation.
Oh yeah, those. Yeah. Oh man, that's like the two biggest robberies we've had in like the recent years of gaming.
So I've only played. I played the first 2 episodes of the Guardians Telltale game, and there was just something that it just didn't grab me, like the Wolf Among Us or the Batman Telltale game. How it grabbed me, because what I really liked about the Batman one was just how it took these characters that we all have this, you know, preconceived origin story for one of them, and it did something totally different that you wouldn't expect, you know, because Batman's been around for so long, and you know, you get this Telltale game, and it's like, okay, that's cool, but like you kind of expect certain things, but then when they kind of like turn it on its head, you're like, oh wow, that's actually a really cool take on the character that
like it was refreshing how it was willing to like take kind of big risks, like let's change something really major about the history, or you know, let's go for like a more like a younger take on him, even though this character is kind of associated with being like older and experienced. But that's some of the stuff that like really set it apart and made it like their first, like, I guess, kind of success in a while.
Yeah, that's totally
relative success.
With Guardians, I feel like it had maybe DC weren't as tight on Batman because there wasn't a movie at the time to tie it into, but with the Guardians game, it was totally superficially, it had to look like the movies, but then they were kind of given rope to do original stuff with it, but not enough. Like they brought in like a female companion to Rocket Raccoon, and I don't know.
Yeah,
some weird stuff. I feel like it had a bit of an identity crisis, that game, from what I played about and from what I've read about the story.
That's the last thing I remember from the Guardians game. They were kind of going through Rocket Raccoon's origin, and there was like a weird companion. I don't remember much from it, but that is the last thing I remember. And yeah, I don't know. It just didn't really grab my interest like that. So I've been thinking about revisiting and, you know, going through with it. Just maybe it's not as bad as some people say it is when you go through the whole thing. I mean, one of the weird things already, like from the first episode, is that they kill Thanos. Spoilers, I guess, in like the first couple minutes. And I always wanted to like find out, okay, what is the twist? Was that actually him, or was it like a decoy or something? Did he have a larger plan at hand? Because the MCU movies have been building Thanos up as like the ultimate final boss, and for him to seemingly die so easily by these group of misfits, it's a little weird.
I hadn't heard about that at all. That's kind of interesting. Like I feel like I would be watching that or playing it rather. It's a little hard to tell when you're playing a Telltale game. And I would be like excited. I would be like, oh wow, that's kind of risky and neat. I hope we like do more outside of that. Like I don't want to see him, but I could totally buy that just because this is how it has to work, is that he'll end up coming back as like the twist for episode 4 and 5, and like go back to being the big bad. I don't know. I bet someone in the chat could probably tell us right now. But
that's definitely what I figured. That's what I figured would happen. So there's that Telltale games, and besides that, the Guardians they've appeared, I believe, in Marvel Heroes, the now closed down MMO from a little bit ago. I guess,
I'm so upset that went down right as I was about to start working on a review for it.
Really?
I was even in talks with one of the developers who gave me like a link to a bunch of free stuff so I could play as Moon Knight and like have all the alternate costumes. Like it was going to be kind of like this cool sponsored thing, sort of,
man.
And then just disappeared like the next week. Like right as I was starting to like get into it and write a review for that, it's like, oh, we just fired everybody.
Did you get to play it much at all?
Like 3 or 4 days worth, and really it was mostly just grinding out side quests. Like I didn't get very far. I was just how many bad guys can I beat up so I can finally buy some better gear?
Right. How about you, Josh?
That's those kind of games.
Yeah, I played a little bit of it when it came to PS4. It's very grindy.
Yeah.
And yeah, by that point, I think they'd already put Ultimate Alliance back on the PS4. So I was like, what's the point playing this? I'll just play the better version of this.
Yeah, I didn't play much either. So yeah, I think I don't know if all the Guardians are playable in Marvel Heroes, but I do believe that they are in the game. And are they in the Lego games at all?
Yeah, they're a pretty major part of 2. And they have the post-credit scene at the end of 1 is centered around the Guardians coming to Earth.
I remember it was prior to the movie coming out, so there wasn't like a distinguished vision of them yet. So Lego Marvel 1 in the post-credits scene where they show up, it's like close enough but still kind of off. Like Groot just doesn't look enough like himself. Like he has more of a Hulk body type, or Rocket Raccoon has like a British accent. Or like just everything about it is
a bad British accent, I might add.
yeah. Oh, Star-Lord was even wearing his original costume like before the new helmet. So it was kind of jarring because like that back then, I mean that was like what, 2013? That's what set my expectation for what they would be like in the movie. And then I saw it and I was like, well, this is way different. What the hell?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I guess in the second one, you said that they're more more prominent in that one.
That's post the movie, so they're the big stars. The whole opening level is on Xandar, I think, and
oh wow,
centered around them.
The whole opening level is basically just Guardians of the Galaxy 1's climax reenacted, but crazier.
There's like a collection that is coming out or came out already of all the Lego games bundled together?
Yeah.
Is that out
like
yet?
All of them?
I think so. I think from Lego Marvel Superheroes and then on. So then you got the Avengers, Avengers 2, and I think that's all of them, right?
It's just the 3, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. So just the Marvel.
Yeah,
stuff.
just the Marvel ones. But even then, I mean, those Lego games, they have a lot of content in them. Even when you know, the base game alone with all the collectibles and all that, and then I'm guessing all the DLC is going to be included. So that's going to be one hell of a bundle, you know.
Yeah, I just bought the season pass for 2 because it was on sale, and I never bothered to get it when it came out. And yeah, I've been playing that again. It's fine. It's not great, but it's okay. I get to play Infinity War as Lego people, so
right. So we got the Guardians in the Lego games, and I think Gamora was playable in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Is that correct?
Xavier? Yeah, her and Rocket.
All right, cool. And I think that might be it for the Guardians in video games.
Don't forget the NES, the Bucky O'Hare ROM hack.
Oh, right. I gotta play that, man.
It looks cool.
They do some interesting things with each character.
Yeah, and that's a good game. The Bucky O'Hare on the NES.
Yeah, I gotta download that sometime. So now that we've kind of gone through the Guardians short history in video games, I guess we can start tossing some ideas for this supposed game that we're getting from Square Enix and Eidos Montreal. Any of you guys want to start first, or should I give you my my one sentence pitch that'll kind of give you a good idea? Which I might add, I thought I was being original and creative when I thought of the idea, but when I tweeted out for people to send us their ideas for a Guardians game, that was not the case. Pretty much they were all on the same page as I was.
Oh,
in terms of the game.
Well, this is pretty much my pitch as well, to be honest. So.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it makes sense, and that's pretty much Mass Effect, but Guardians of the Galaxy.
Mass Effect, but even funnier.
Right.
And Mass Effect was already really funny, so like, where do you go from there?
With funnier faces.
Oh man. Create your own Peter Quill and just turn all the slides to 100% or 0% so he looks like he's put his face into a fucking volcano.
So I mean, it fits pretty well. You know, you got Mass Effect, which is a game that's centered around you and, you know, your crew and kind of building that relationship and I guess finding out more about their background and just, you know, going out into the galaxy and exploring and coming across aliens and stuff like that. And I mean, I think that would be a good formula for a Guardians of the Galaxy game. You know, you swap out the Normandy with the Milano, and you know, you go to. I mean, and you know, the first question that I brought up with the Daredevil game, and I want to bring up with this one is, you know, do you go open world? And I personally think that the open world that you have in Mass Effect, you know, I mean, I don't know if you guys really consider that open world or just separate, like smallish to medium size hub worlds with you know, different side quests and objectives and stuff like that. And you know, the Guardians having all these different planets. I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't read any Guardian comic books, but from the movies, you know, all the different planets that we see, that fits really well. Where you just, you know, you set out, you got your galaxy map, and you go to Nowhere or Xandar or wherever, and you know, you land your ships, and then you're introduced to just a whole bunch of different objectives and people you can meet, and yeah.
I think that would actually work pretty well. Like, especially if like every hub world / like major location ended up being something from Cosmic Marvel, because like there's so much material there to work with and like so many characters you could potentially bump into. Like I wouldn't mind like, oh, here's just Silver Surfer is just like stranded somewhere and you bump into him. He's like, hey, can you help me find my board so I could get out of here? It's like I'm like depowered right now, so I can't call it back to me or something. Or like I just found a colony of Asgardians who need help fixing a ship or something. Like, just doing little small favors for random folks around the Marvel universe, since, God knows there's how many different species, or, you could like fight Skrulls or something. Like, there's a lot there to work with if we take that sort of template. And honestly, I think like that could kind of scratch that itch that Marvel Ultimate Alliance didn't quite get to with the RPG elements, like, dialogue branches and like side quests with branching paths.
Yeah, it also, Mass Effect has got the whole, was it Renegade, and what was the other one?
Paragon.
Right. And not that you will make like evil choices necessarily as the Guardians, but maybe like more, all right, do I want to just help out these people, or do I want to be a little more selfish with my choices? And that, it's something that, again, like I don't know if the Guardians are like that in the comic book, but that's like what they were going for in the movies, where you got like they're good guys, but they can kind of have their own selfish agenda as well.
They can sometimes be not 100% a dick, but sometimes
they got my dick message.
Yeah, no, I think that fits especially well for them, is because like that take on them is meant to be like a little edgier in terms of morals, like even the start of like Guardians of the Galaxy 2 was just like them getting in trouble for stealing something when they were supposed to be helping. Like they're writing that line so perfectly that I think like a morality system really would kind of fit.
Yeah, totally. And it would work better for the Guardians versus the Avengers, say, like when we pitch the Avengers game, because the Avengers are, bastions of everything that's good. There's no moral ambiguity with the Avengers whatsoever. They always do the right thing. But with the Guardians, there is that kind of those blurred lines, should we say?
Plus, it gives you like some cool character interactions to work with, because like maybe Gamora is always like, we're gonna assume that Peter Quill is the player character for this. Gamora could always be leaning in on one side, like telling you what the responsible thing to do is, while Rocket is like, "No, man, just fuck them. Let's just steal it."
Yeah, and those interpersonal relationships as well are much more interesting to explore. And to kind of go on the Mass Effect thing, that's basically a space dating simulator. You could definitely, if you're not necessarily setting that relationship with Gamora in stone like the movies are doing, you could.
Do you want to romance Groot?
You could explore some tree branches.
Oh shit!
Let me check out your twig.
Oh my god! Just killing it over here.
I was gonna, to go back to that whole moral choices thing. With you got all these different planets, hub worlds that you can revisit and go back. I think it'd be cool if, depending on the choices you make with the native people from that planet, if you do something to help them out, maybe if you go back to that planet, you'll get like better deals in the marketplace of that planet. Or if you're just like 100% selfish, you steal. Because the vibe I got from the first Guardians movie with that opening scene when Peter Quill is seeking out that artifact or whatever, kind of like an Uncharted, Nathan Drake, Indiana Jones kind of thing, or Tomb Raider, where he's kind of this treasure hunter that sells stuff to the black market. So I guess if your mission is to find out, or if you come across some artifact that's like important to that settlement or the people of that planet, if you return that, you'll have a better standing with those people, and they can give you either better deals on their marketplace, or if you steal the artifact, and your standing with them won't be so well, but you can get like a much better deal in the black market to get more credits to upgrade your ship, or just buy better weapons and gear and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think something like that would be perfect, honestly. Like it's kind of a no-brainer to just like format it like this. Like I know it's kind of the easy option, is just to like take something that already exists and just kind of slot it in. It's like, all right, what if we just put a like a Marvel skin over this, but I mean that's how a lot of these games typically tend to be. You know,
welcome to licensed games.
Yeah, right.
That's how it's done.
I mean, Telltale is like the definition of that. I've heard people compare them to. Someone said that they were the Funko Pop of game developers.
Yeah, that's true. What about like a bounty system? So either collecting bounties or having a bounty set on you where the sovereign or something like that are coming after you, or what do they call them? The High Church or whatever. The ones that worship Adam Warlock.
Have some like GTA like elements with like a wanted status or.
Yeah, and to go back to what you were saying about the hub worlds, I think that's definitely the way to do it. Actually, something I was going to bring up later is Ratchet and Clank, and the way that kind of like the planet hopping element of that I think would really work well, and that sets the backdrop for this kind of space adventure that feels big in scope, bigger than having like just one huge open world. Would be to have all these smaller hub worlds.
Yeah, and like so. Getting between those hub worlds, would you guys care for any type of like space combat, with the ship?
That is something that could help set it apart from like a Mass Effect sort of thing, is because that really had no space combat to say whatsoever, which is kind of weird because it like had like a huge opening for that.
Yeah, it was supposed to be in Andromeda. That was going to be one of the big new features of Andromeda, but didn't end up not happening.
So like, you telling me that when they were making Andromeda, they got lazy with some things? I can't.
Just a couple things. Just a couple.
I don't believe you. I think you're making that up.
I mean, but, to be honest,
that would be cool though.
I'm not the. I don't know. I don't know if I care much for it. I think to me it'd be kind of a chore personally. I don't know. I'm not always the biggest fan of like flight controls when it comes to like ships and stuff like that.
You know, I haven't really played many games either where I thought it was like the super awesome selling point. I think it depends on the pacing. If you put it in just enough that it doesn't get annoying, maybe sometimes you actually have the player asking, "Hey, I wonder when I'm going to get to pilot another ship. That was fun." Like it's like you got to do the opposite of the Batmobile thing, where it's they're shoving it at you every 5 seconds. Like you gotta make them work for it, so that eventually they'll be like, "Hey, that was cool," because like no one ever really looks back at like the vehicle sections in like Half-Life and thinks, "Oh man, those were awesome," because they forced you to go with that shit for like 2 straight hours.
Yeah.
All the vehicle sections in Mass Effect are notoriously terrible.
Oh yeah.
They got a little better. That's one thing that Andromeda did a little better, I would say. Their vehicle, their ground terrain vehicle was a little better on the controls.
Can I just say some of the stuff you were suggesting before, Diego, sounds suspiciously close to No Man's Sky. Where you're going, I think there was a system in No Man's Sky where if you do certain quests for people on certain planets, when you go there, you get money off.
Yeah.
Well, okay, hold on. There's a distinction to make, though. Is it what No Man's Sky actually is, or one of the many, many things that they promised and did not deliver on with that game?
Exactly, well, with their recent update, was it called No Man's Sky Next? I actually got addicted to that for like a month. And so you kind of caught me, Josh.
I wasn't accusing you of anything. I'm just saying maybe that's something we can steal from in our pitch, because that had the aerial combat and that has a different approach to the open world, obviously.
Yeah, more what is it called? Procedurally generated.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan. I mean, it worked for the kind of game that No Man's Sky is. I mean, I see No Man's Sky as kind of like, all right, you just turn your brain off, maybe listen to a podcast for a couple hours, and you're over here like mining for minerals and stuff like that.
It's an ambient game. It's
exactly right.
It's like doing yoga.
Yeah, very therapeutic, and But yeah, and again, the combat in that game, I would just run away whenever I'm galaxy hopping and some pirates pop up or whatever it is that they were. I would just avoid it. Not. I was a peaceful space explorer, pacifist. But one thing I want to ask you guys, Xavier, you brought up that Star-Lord would be the player character. What do you guys think about having it be co-op?
Well, I feel like in order to keep it like fair and balanced, they would have to have the other player character like relatively similar to him. So it'd probably be Gamora. But I mean, you could add little variances like maybe have her be more melee based because she has the super strength or something. But both of them can still do like cover based third person shooter waist high combat.
Because I mean, I guess apart from Groot, they can all use weapons, but each of them could specialize in something different. I would imagine Peter Quill would be, he's got his jet boots or whatever, so he can have that be unique to him where he's flying around. A little bit more vertical combat. Gamora could have a sword for more expertise in melee. What do you guys think about having Groot and Rocket be like intertwined to be kind of the same character?
So like, that could actually be really cool. Is like Rocket is just on Groot's shoulders, so if you aim, you go into like a third person view of like Rocket aiming, but then if you do melee attacks, it's Groot is the one who's like swinging his arms or something.
Yeah, and I think they're actually doing that for Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. Well, not like it wouldn't be for the third person shooting thing, but I think they are just gonna have them be one character.
So like a noob Cybot situation,
right?
That's kind of cool when that happens, and I feel like that fits like really perfect for them. Or actually, even better comparison is Farah Tor from MKX.
I think that's with the little midget dude on his back, right?
Yeah.
But it would fit because if we're having this game be co-op and it's gonna be a third person shooter, that could be a really clever fix where like wait a minute, Groot doesn't use guns. It's like, all right, so you hold down the trigger and then you're aiming down the sight with Rocket. So they would all, and Drax, I mean, Drax has used weapons even in the movies. So I guess he has like super strength too, so I guess he can kind of have some tanky like melee moves or take more damage or something like that. So I think it could definitely work having all the characters be having this game be co-op while still having it be a third person cover based shooter.
But like that's the thing though, is that how many co-op players is it? Is it like a 4-player thing? Like
how many guards? So it would be,
well, if you bundle Rocket and Groot together, it's really like it actually just kind of fits down to 4 then.
Yeah. I mean that's like the usual co-op number, right?
Yeah. So I think that actually works if you make that little concession with the two of them being the same thing, and then maybe you could even like add like some kind of other thing where it's like here's a vent that none of us are small enough to get into. Rocket, get over here, and he could do something like that.
Totally.
So yeah, I think that could work. So would it be like kind of like trying to think of a comparison here? Like what's just a 4-player kind of third person action game like that? Because I mean, Mass Effect really never did that. It had its multiplayer modes, but nothing like what we're describing.
That's kind of the thing. I think that would be like what would kind of make it really special from Mass Effect, where it's like you've got this grand, like expansive campaign across the galaxy with side quests and all this stuff, but it's 4-player co-op. And this is kind of the big, I haven't like heard anyone pitch this before, but like my big thing that I want to propose for this game is, how Mass Effect has the dialogue, the like the dialogue trees, the whole conversation thing. What if you're playing, and like it would be a little tricky because it would mean that like whoever you're playing co-op with, it would have to be that same group of people from beginning to end. But imagine the dialogue tree, but each player gets to choose their own dialogue, so they contribute their own or like from choices.
Oh, like instead of here's just one big like dialogue tree for one character, what if it's like it switches off every line
exactly.
or so?
So everybody gets to contribute their own opinion to the situation, and you can kind of establish different relationships depending if you want to oppose, you want to disagree with Star-Lord, or
so like let's say all four characters are, because Groot doesn't really add much to the conversation. But let's say like all four of them are having some kind of conversation with I don't know, who's a space person that they could talk to. Just give me a name.
What was that Adam guy?
Adam Warlock?
Yeah.
Okay, so all four of them are talking to Adam Warlock, and it like switches off. Each character has their own little like thing to respond with.
Mm-hmm.
So like the rocket player on the team can just like go for only the renegade dialogue options, so to speak, and like just say a lot of stuff to just antagonize him, while maybe like the Drax player is being a little bit more like neutral about it, or the Star-Lord guy, like when it goes on his turn, is just like totally in agreement with him. So that means that like from that point forward, when all of those characters have to interact with him one-on-one, it leads to some kind of different like minor dynamic. Like Adam Warlock's dialogue will be like more aggressive towards Rocket specifically later. But here's something that I think could really make that special is, what if like when it comes to like the big decisions, you all four of you have to vote?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the thing I was pitching as a whole, where it's like it's all one conversation, but when it's your turn to speak, you may agree with something that Star-Lord might have already said, or you can disagree with it, and you all get into this argument potentially, and you kind of have to come into an agreement over what to do.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. I don't see how it could possibly work, but I get what you're saying. It's like each contribution to the conversation. There are all these different branching paths that it could take. So
right.
The conversation could be going one way, and then Rocket says something totally to antagonize the person you're talking to, and the conversation diverges. And
exactly, yeah, because you think back to like the movie where they're all sitting in a circle. I believe it was the first movie. Where they're all just talking amongst each other, and they're just kind of going back and forth, not always agreeing on what to do. And but yeah, I mean, it would be a hard thing to pull off, because again, like you would have to, because you can't just okay, let's say you're playing for a couple hours and then you guys stop and then you pick up the next day. It would have to, you're all establishing this relationship that you've built with all the different dialogue options that you've chosen. So it wouldn't make sense for like, all right, someone else comes in, some other friend that you have, and maybe like he has a different progression on his save file, and it's not gonna make sense when he comes in and joins in on your game, or if he comes in and it uses your established relationship on your save file, but he's gonna come in, but he's gonna be like, okay, so like what's our standing in our group,
Yeah, because like you, in your playthrough as a Gamora, you saw a Drax like fight this guy, right? Like just have a full on like fist fight with this character after some kind of dialogue interaction, and then you load it up with another guy who's playing a totally neutral Drax, or totally like Paragon one, and like now those two characters are interacting again, as if that didn't happen, and you're like, oh well.
Yeah, it would have made more sense.
There would have to be some kind of like workaround for that, and it's not impossible to figure out some kind of trick. Like maybe it's like every game that you're in with someone else is its own save file. So like,
I mean,
what if you wanted to
technology? Can make it
yeah, something like that. Like,
yeah, I mean, the main way I can see it working is like everyone. It has to be the same people playing for but then like, how do you do that for a game?
Yeah,
that's like
what? Yeah, what if someone just decides they don't like the game anymore?
Yeah,
and just wants to quit.
Or server dropouts and things. I think that's traditionally why this kind of thing hasn't worked. Even, like stuff like The Division and Destiny is about as close as that as you can get, because you either have the progression tied to the player, in which case, you have the issues that we're saying where people aren't available or server dropouts or whatever, or you have it as an overall thing and then it becomes irrelevant, or vice versa. You get what I'm saying?
Well, okay,
all the story stuff that you're setting
with
up.
Crazier things though. We've solved bigger problems with like weird stuff. Like I think the way we fix that whole Daredevil thing. Let's put our heads together. I think this isn't impossible. We just got to really think outside the box.
If I can come at this from a completely different angle, I feel like the co-op thing is appealing, but the reason that the movies have pitched Peter Quill as the protagonist is because he is the human element of it, and he is the average person. He isn't a huge tree man, or he doesn't have super strength, or he's not a deadly assassin. And I feel like if you're then putting him he doesn't work in a co-op situation as much, because he's got the jet boots, but Rocket could as easily have the jet boots and stuff. I don't know. It's like
he's sort of underpowered compared to everyone else, is what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. He's totally underpowered, but that's what he is. He's the
least super guy on the superhero team, but he's also still the leader anyway.
Yeah, and that's what makes him relatable to readers and to movie audiences. But in a gameplay setting, he'd be the person that no one wants to be.
I feel like there's something you could do to make that work. Like it's not a complete lost cause. I mean, if you kind of go for like, all right, so let's take a look at this from two angles. All right, you got a very human character like let's say a Resident Evil protagonist, right? They can run at like a decent speed. They can, they can do combat pretty effectively given what they're fighting. But then you got like Lara Croft in like Tomb Raider Legend, who can do like backflips and side flips and like, climb up walls and like swing on ropes, and like is just kind of this like superhuman sort of, but is still within the realm of being believable. I think there's a little bit of a concession made where you can have your Peter Quill still seem like relatively normal compared to the rest of the group, but still have him be a little bit more video gamey in that regard. Like he doesn't have to be entirely just like the lame-o of the group. Like you can do some stuff with him.
What about the is Celestial background? Is that like a common like, is that part of his background usually in the comics, or was that
his dad is a completely different character in the comics?
Really?
His dad is like some like intergalactic emperor who's like a dick, I guess. So
Jason of Spartax.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
Oh, right. He was in that Captain Marvel story I just recently read.
Yeah, the Kelly Sue DeConnick one.
Yeah.
But he's just like an asshole.
So he doesn't have any like special abilities from his dad?
No, I think that was just for the movie. They might have rolled that in now. I haven't read any Guardians recent stuff.
That's the thing, is like MCU kind of causes some weird retcons. Like Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver are no longer Magneto's kids. It was revealed that they were like adopted, basically.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Just so that they could get them in Age of Ultron. Like they actually made that change in the comics because it allowed them a legal loophole in a contract. and that's kind of appalling and horrible.
Yeah, the MCU is too powerful, man.
But like that stuff happens, so yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Star-Lord's dad is someone else now. I mean, it would be kind of funny if they actually did make Ego the Living Planet, because like Ego in the comics is just so different.
Yeah.
So I know that usually we picture these Marvel games as a third-person action game, but maybe to get the rest of the Guardians more involved when it comes to gameplay, what do you guys think of having it be like a turn-based combat kind of thing?
I don't like.
Not your cup of tea.
I've played a couple of turn-based combat games, and like what are some examples? Like Persona is one, right? Or South Park Stick of Truth.
That counts?
Yeah. And so far it's just those two games that are my experience with it, and I don't know. I feel like those work given the characters that you're using for those, but like when you're playing as like a superhero, like someone who's like,
you want to be in the moment.
Yeah, you want to be dynamic, you want to be fast, you want to be strong. I don't think you get that same kind of sense from like a turn-based thing, is because the whole point of turn-based is that you're like restricted for a little bit while something else is happening, and that doesn't feel good like as a player, that kind of input when you're a guy who can throw a truck. Like you don't want to wait for the other guy to do something first. You want to just get in there and, use your powers. So I could understand like the way it would be implemented could work given the amount of characters, but I feel like it would end up being kind of frustrating for some people.
Yeah, I agree. I'm lukewarm on turn-based RPGs as well, but if any Marvel property was going to work, it would be this one. So if they were looking for a different way to go to differentiate it from the pack of Arkham clones, then that would be a good way to go. Or the other alternative would be some dull fucking Inhumans game that no one would play.
Oh man.
Where you do kind of you've got to do turn-based monarchy structuring.
I think, have any of you guys played Dragon Age?
No, I have not, but I've heard very good things from many people.
I think the combat in that game is some sort of like hybrid of real time and turn-based combat with like cooldowns on your abilities and stuff like that. And I think you do have a protagonist, like your character, but I do think you can switch around your group and play as them during combat. To everyone has a specific role. You got the healer, and I mean, I'm talking out of my ass right now. I never really played it, but like from the reviews that I've seen of it, I think that's a thing where you can switch between your party and use all of their different abilities during combat.
I think a few. Wasn't the most recent Final Fantasy like that as well? I've not played it, but
right, yeah, I believe so. Yeah, you can switch with them during. I think it's only during combat.
Right.
And so I think something like that could work. Like again, like I know normally you want to just have it be a straight up real time third-person action game with moment to moment combat. But I mean, I think sometimes like it would just be cool if like we got some Marvel games that weren't just, okay, here's another third-person action game, where it's like it goes deep into a genre where it's like, okay, it's a straight up RPG, like turn-based RPG with heavy RPG mechanics and that kind of thing.
The only way that comic book games can like transcend Arkham is to do that. Otherwise, it will always be that we just get one that gets good reviews every couple of years. But for it to become the thing that the comic book movies have done, the MCU films, they succeeded in saying, okay, well, we're making a heist film or we're doing this. So I really hope that that's a strategy they have, is that they double down on these different genres and approaches to game making.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like Winter Soldier being like an espionage
spy thriller.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't care about turn-based RPGs, but if Marvel made one, I would absolutely care about it.
Yeah, that's the thing, dude. Because I say the same thing. You give me a Marvel MM. I'm not an MMO guy, but you give me like a Marvel World of Warcraft style MMO, I'd pay the subscription fee every month to play
Totally.
it. So I mean, I guess we can get into some of the tweets that we got. See what our viewers and listeners' ideas were. This comes from at Andrew796482464. Linear story that switches between linear story that switches between characters, all with different play styles.
Something like that could be interesting. Like you develop a really, it's like a sort of like whole mini game in itself for every character. So like maybe with Rocket, like he's by himself and you have to do a lot of like puzzle solving or vent crawling, or like, that like something that really makes use of his scale as a character, being like 2 feet tall. While as like something with Drax would feel more like a God of War kind of thing.
You know what's funny about when I first saw Guardians, and I heard Drax's backstory about how he's this angry, muscular, bald dude with
he's just actually, now that I just said that, I'm realizing he is kind of just a funny Kratos
whose wife and child was murdered, and he's got a red scar or red line on his face.
He's just funny Kratos.
I get something for Gamora. I think she can have maybe stealth missions, to into her assassin background.
And then something more Uncharted-y for Quill.
Yeah, that's how I pictured the Guardians game for a while, for it to just be space Uncharted.
If you think about it, the Guardians are basically all the PlayStation exclusive games. You have Ratchet and Clank as Rocket and Groot.
Oh yeah,
Nathan Drake as Peter Quill, Kratos as Drax, and maybe Aloy from
Halo. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's basically what were those
PlayStation All Stars?
All Stars, yeah, exactly.
Nice. I like that.
That's kind of fun. That actually opens a whole new like section of this conversation. Is just like, let's actually run with that whole thing that you just said. Like, that's the gameplay for all of these characters.
That's true. Yeah, that could totally work. Next up, this comes from Blair Farrell at Blarcade. He says, won't be able to sit in this evening. It's okay, you're here in spirit. But Mass Effect just with the Guardians during the Annihilation pre-Awesome Mix era. I think you brought that up earlier, Josh, the Annihilation run.
Yeah, I think it's not going to happen. Whatever Guardians game we're going to get is going to be so MCU and Bendis focused. As much as I'd love to see the Abnett and Lanning stuff kind of more faithfully represented.
Yeah, I can already picture the red jacket on Peter Quill.
Exactly, yeah. And the headphones. You are not going to get a version of Peter Quill in a video game now who doesn't have the Walkman and the orange headphones.
That's one of those things that like is kind of unfortunate about movie adaptations, is that it shapes, like, because that's the one that reaches the most people, and it just shapes such a, like, it informs the character so much that everything else, in order to avoid brand confusion, because it's a business first, has to kind of like form around whatever that is. I feel like if there's any reason to get upset about a movie being inaccurate to like a comic character, it's just because like it could be potentially damaging to like the already existing material. Like, let's say, you're like the biggest Peter Quill fan. Like, he's a relatively obscure character circa like 2012 when you're into him. And, you really like this version of him that's a little more serious. And then the movie comes out and that character is just gone. Just completely different forever now. Like, all these games and all these other comics are going to have to kind of form around that. And I understand the frustration from a lot of people.
Yeah, it's really, really bizarre how the movie version just really takes over. There's really nothing that happened like that up until now before, you know?
And that's pretty much why I don't, this is a bigger conversation, but why I don't read a lot of modern, especially Marvel comics, is because the other side of that is that comic creators don't have the same autonomy over those characters anymore that they did. They can't do anything that's going to contradict massively with the movie version. It's not like a writer could now just go, okay, well, you know, we are going to go back to that, or we're going to do something completely different. It's always going to be informed by that going forward. And at that point, it's like, this is my negative view. What's even the point of the comics at that point? If they're not informing the movies, then what's the point?
Yeah, it's like up to a certain... That's something else that's going to be like a problem going down the line. I know where this is way off topic, but this is an interesting talking point.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Is everything is based on the comics up to a certain point, and then the MCU happened. There's going to be a point where the MCU is going to run out of pre-MCU material, and then it's going to have to start recycling itself, and then it'll just be this snake eating its own tail effect where it just doesn't have anywhere to go now. Like, we've run out of storylines that were untainted by our changes. So now everything after that is just going to feel like basically just another MCU. Like the more recent Guardians runs just feel like the movies. Like they incorporate more of the characters from the movies. They incorporate a lot more of those character arcs. Or the same with like the Avengers. Like the team had this entirely different lineup for like 20 years and then went back to the original one just to have that synchronicity with the MCU. Like, we're going to get to this weird boiling point, maybe like 10 years down the line, where there's going to be no material to adapt anymore. And they're just going to have to like kind of wing it and figure out something else to do.
Yeah, it would be like a hard reboot, maybe, right?
Like, we just here's MCU 2, like disconnected from the first one. We'll do even different stuff. Like Iron Man's not even funny in this one. He's just a dick, like he used to be. Or like, what if it like became like in order to just create like something different again to keep that franchise alive, they'll have to do a whole other movie universe that's more like the classic comics, and then the comics will have to revert back, and then it'll just be like this like back and forth forever.
They'll have to do an Ultimate Universe version of the MCU.
Yeah,
which is already what it pretty much was, but it'll be like that kind of paradigm.
And I know it sounds like a weird statement, is that they're gonna run out of material, but really, like, think about it. Like, the Avengers movies, there's only been 3 of them, and they've already taken like major aspects of maybe like 30 or 40 major arcs that crossed like 10 to 15 issues. Like, there's just so much material they've already pulled from that it's like, are you gonna do another movie about Vision?
Yeah, and across like and it's not just that they're pulling it from all one era, it's across like 50, 60 years of...
Yeah, right? It's like, well, here's an idea from a storyline from 1962, but like 10 minutes later in the runtime, here's one from like 2011.
So there's no room for all the character development that happened in the comics in those 20 years. There's no room for that within the movies. You can't reverse... Well, you could reverse those things, but that's when audiences would start to get bored, I think.
I didn't think we'd end up getting into this kind of topic right now, but I think we just discovered that the MCU kind of has like a hard like end date on it, when it'll just like collapse on itself.
Yeah. It'll go the way of the Western, of course it will. But the thing that's weird about it for me is that the assumption from Marvel, I think, is that they're doing this so that people can walk out of the movie theater and say, I've just seen Guardians of the Galaxy, I really enjoyed it, I'm going to go and read a comic, and then they get Brian Michael Bendis' Guardians run, which is like the film. But I just don't think that is happening. I don't think that, not on a great scale at least, I don't think people are making that transition from the films to the comics. It's going the other way.
Well, that's the reason the comic industry is struggling right now, is because it just doesn't. Okay, comics have been and always will be a very niche thing. It is impossible, no matter what gimmick you try, no matter what weird strategy you pull, to get people who don't like comics or just are not interested in them to just pull a complete 180. Like, in my mind, comics are a generational thing. All of us pretty much started liking it because we had someone older than us who already liked it. Like, it's like something that's always passed from parent to child, right? Maybe if you have 2 kids, you can make them both comic nerds and it'll have a multiplication effect in that regard or something. But for the most part, like, Johnny never picked up a Marvel book in his entire life, who doesn't even know what Spider-Man's real name is. Like, someone who's like completely averse to that, all of that stuff, is not going to watch a movie and go, man, I want to read 300 hours of just more of that. Like, no, I have friends who, like my buddy David, absolutely just does not like comics. Getting him to sit down and like actually read one is like pulling teeth, even like by like his favorite writer. It just doesn't happen. So I mean, I wonder sometimes if like the comic industry is really just going to start struggling at that point, because it's just not getting the new people that it's like trying to force, you know?
Yeah. And if I can go, sorry, even more off topic, I think
No,
one of the big things about comics and particularly Marvel, I think, is that they have like a branding issue. And this is something I've wanted to talk about for absolutely ages. I was going to make a video about it at one point, but it doesn't fit in the scope of my channel. Is that I can go into a Tesco or a Walmart and I can buy a mug like this, which has, you know, John Romita art and Gil Kane art on it and stuff. And that's the stuff that's being sold in mainstream venues. Is the classic looks, but that isn't being represented in the comics. It's not being represented in the films. All of that stuff is like you said, cannibalizing itself and doing the movie thing. But the stuff that's being peddled, the merchandise, is based on the classic designs, and there isn't room for that. I don't know. I'd like to see them rely more on the kind of the classic Marvel brand, whereas they rely so heavily on the movies. I don't think that's going to draw people to the comics. I think DC Rebirth was a prime example of going back to that classic formula, and that had a massive boost for their sales, and they kind of, you know, dropped off. But
well,
I don't know.
You know, Marvel has tried a lot of things recently. It's tried, well, for one, it's tried, all right, let's try and make some headlines by like changing around a lot of our characters, you know, getting a more diverse cast of characters. And I think that got them enough like positive press that it sustained them for like a year or two. Like that had the effect they wanted it. But the fact of the matter is, all the people that are praising like Riri Williams like taking over as Iron Man, or like Miles Morales, or Amadeus Cho as the Hulk, all of the people really like praising that for what it represents really aren't actually gonna buy more than maybe the first like 1 through 5 issues. Like, all of those series like just started to struggle and tank, and not a single one of them is like past like 30 issues. Like, I don't think Miles Morales has had a single comic run that has hit 30 issues yet.
No. And that sucks. That sucks. And I'm not against diversity, but, you know, we're not comics gating at all.
No. I'm just saying, like, it's sad that they tried that. They were really hoping it would work, and it just didn't. It's like, if that's not going to work, then what does? Because neither does like appealing to the fans of the movies, because it's just kind of a whole other thing at that point.
Yeah.
But what were you going to say?
Well, I don't know. I kind of can't articulate what I'm trying to say, but I really feel like they've lost sight of what it was. And, you know, I feel like this with video games as well. Video games that have become so obsessed with trying to ape cinema. Yeah. And trying to make everything cinematic. And that's what the comics are doing as well. Like, every single like a title Marvel book now will have digital photorealistic art. and it's trying to be a cinematic experience. But comics as a medium never set out to be a cinematic experience in the first place.
No, I mean, they should be their own thing.
Yeah, exactly. And there's absolutely room for diversity and stuff. I don't know.
Well, I mean, you could also talk about it from like, is it kind of cynical and horrible that really like the big push for diversity was really because it would help sales?
Exactly.
Yeah, it didn't feel like it was coming from the most sincere place, is what I feel like a lot of people criticize it for.
Yeah, because like to take a character like Black Panther, and you could be cynical about that as well. Maybe I think Stan Lee was really a genius at kind of feeling out these like moments in pop culture and kind of.
Yeah, he absolutely knew when the right time to write something was.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's a business, and they've got to do this. But there's no clear strategy at this point. It's like clutching at straws. It's like, we've got to make it like the movies. We've got to do this, and it isn't being allowed to stand on its own merit. The medium as a whole, except for in indies.
Yeah. So like as of right now, DC is selling well enough to stay afloat. They kind of have to have their comics be their own thing. It's got to be like a house of ideas over there, because like they don't have a big video game franchise anymore. They haven't had one like really sustaining them. I mean, I guess just Injustice, right? But like they don't have the kind of pull for their films that they want, to. They don't have those Marvel numbers with their films. So the comics over at DC seem to still be doing a lot of like unique and interesting stuff. They're like, hey, let's do a continuation of Watchmen, or let's do a weird experimental storyline where we announce that there's actually more than one Joker. While as Marvel is over here just like getting worse and worse by the day, trying to figure out what to do next. And at some point, you're going to have to wonder, like, when is enough for, like, when is Marvel going to either, like fall apart or have to just hard reset itself again?
Yeah, and that's what I was hoping Secret Wars was going to be in 2015 or 2016, whenever that was going to be.
They had, like, the best opportunity, but it was just, here's more of the same.
Yeah. Just out of interest, what does Aquaman look like in DC Comics at the moment? Does he look like Jason Momoa?
You know what? Let me look that up.
Aquaman. I think he still looks. He still has his classic look for the most part.
Okay, still blonde.
I think so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I
Okay.
mean, he's had that long hair, bearded look before in the comics. So that's not like a new thing for the movies. You'd be able to tell if he specifically had like more black hair and like I guess less white guy features.
Yeah.
Let me pull up let me see if I can find like a page from a 2019 issue. I know this is really off topic for our video game podcast, but I feel like this is actually kind of in a weird way all on topic.
Oh no, yeah, it's related because it definitely would affect the look of the Guardians game. It doesn't just this whole effect of the MCU wouldn't just go as far as the comics, but video games as well.
Okay, I'm pulling up the most recent issue of Aquaman that I can find. This came out like a week ago. He has a beard and long hair, but he's still got, the blonde and like really pale skin, and he doesn't seem to have any tattoos that I can see. So yeah, he still looks like classic Aquaman, actually.
90s mullet Aquaman.
Yeah.
I mean, it does relate to the Guardians, because the reason that this conversation has come up is because the Guardians were not even C-listers before the movie. They were, E, F, G listers, and that's why they were prime real estate for James Gunn to come in with a vision and go, right, well, it's going to be like this, and it was totally his thing, and that's why they've been such a victim of this, as opposed to. Iron Man is pretty untouched in the comics, I would say.
I think he's noticeably more snarky Like, he talks a little more Bendis-y, but other than that, he's pretty much how he was 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah. I mean,
Like,
every Marvel character talks Bendis-y nowadays.
That's an unfortunate problem.
It's unbearable.
you can't figure out where it's like, okay, is this Joss Whedon or is this Bendis? But either way, no one will shut the fuck up, and everyone is funny.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Man, I miss melodrama.
I got that feeling from that Captain Marvel book I was reading a couple days ago.
Every character does the DreamWorks face.
So, I mean, I think that was kind of cool how we opened that up to a much bigger conversation topic, and I feel like that's something that we should not stray away from in the future.
It's definitely prevalent, and it's important to have in the conversation.
Yeah, because like a big part of this is going to be the branding, or what storylines they'll take inspiration from, or what aesthetic they'll use. Like, the entire identity of this game theoretically would have to be affected by the films, and you gotta kind of step back and ask, well, like, why is everything so heavily reliant on what's going on in those movies? Because it almost kind of kills the creativity, because they're not feeling like they're not feeling like their own thing. They're feeling like an advertisement. Like, we've done away with movie licensed games, but have we really? Like,
one thing
we're
I
not
will
doing
say,
like,
though,
here's a game version of a recent movie. It's more like, here's a game that's got its own story, but it's still a lot like the movie. So maybe they just kind of pulled the wool over our eyes, and like those kinds of games are actually just still happening.
How do you guys think Spider-Man PS4 did in that regard? Because I think it did a good job of apart from the techie stuff and the costume design, I think it did a good job of kind of having its own kind of like hybrid of everything, from comics to some of the movies.
There's some ideas from Homecoming and like the MCU and stuff that are implemented very well. Like, it took little cues from just about everywhere. That's why I think why people responded so well, is it's just such a breath of fresh air. Like, it just doesn't really feel like anything in particular. It just feels like just a very general Spider-Man. Like,
still really recognizable.
Like, there's enough there to feel like good for comic fans, like people who are really attached to that vision of the character. There's enough that like even the fans of the MCU take, which is very different, can be like, yeah, I could see this being like an older version of MCU Peter, or like there's even enough little winks and nods to people who like the Amazing Spider-Man films or the Raimi movies. Like, I think the response to that one was so universally positive is because it just wasn't tainted by all these other like brand things. And I feel like that should be encouraged. And like, I feel like we really need to send a message, is that like, we want more of that. Don't just make it a big advertisement, because that game really just like, it just has like different messages and different themes and different like ideas from anything going on in the MCU movie currently. So it really doesn't feel like a piece of marketing material. It just feels like it's like, wow, they did a big budget adaptation, kind of Uncharted-y sort of Spider-Man game finally. And that's something to get hype for in and of itself. It should not be a tool to generate hype for a movie.
Yeah, totally. Hopefully that's the same kind of approach that we get from the rest of the Marvel games, where you'll see stuff you recognize from MCU and comics or TV shows or something like that.
But here's a big but. I just realized that game started development probably before MCU Spider-Man was even greenlit. I think that game has been in development, for like 4-ish years. We've only really had MCU Spider-Man for a little over 3.
Right.
I think the reason it's so like unaffected is because maybe just the timing didn't line up. Because I mean, it was like right after the Andrew Garfield franchise just imploded, and then they hadn't really like cast their new Spider-Man yet. There was just this little dead zone where there wasn't a movie at the time, and like maybe that's when they put a lot of the big creative decisions for what that game was going to be. And maybe the sad reality is that because there wasn't a Spider-Man movie in that brief window, that's why it's just so like itself and normal and has just identity. So maybe the scary thing we all have to come to terms with is that because of Marvel being the way it is, maybe the sequel is going to have MCU Spider-Man written all over it. And maybe like that big love letter that you felt to just like general, just if you're a fan of something with Spider-Man's name on it, you'll probably like this game. Maybe that's just going to go away now. Because now finally, like, because, you know, Marvel couldn't really like come in and just like derail their whole development cycle and be like, no, don't cast Yuri Lowenthal. Cast someone who sounds like they're 19. Just put them in high school again. Like, there's just too much money being thrown around. It's such a big budget game that you couldn't quite do that. But now, because the second one hasn't really like started yet, maybe that's what they're going to do is just like, okay, we know you've set him to be a little bit older, but reel it back a little. Maybe in the sequel, he's going to college again. Like, maybe they're going to start doing those things, and that's kind of terrifying.
I trust that Insomniac will make the right choice.
I hope so.
And in Insomniac, we trust, right?
Yeah, I hope Marvel doesn't just open one of those suitcases that you don't see what's inside of, but there's an eerie gold glow, and then the developers are like, the dollar signs form in their eyes, and they go, all right, whatever you want, boss.
Oh, boy.
I've been biting my tongue on this whole conversation because one of the things I criticized that game for was being too familiar.
Really?
I mean,
yeah, I actually of it, and I
like the way you've put it, is that it takes a little bit of everything and it makes it accessible, but I don't know.
Like
I'm not getting into this
general. Yeah, I mean, that could be a whole other podcast.
I already had a comment section that was a garbage fire. I'm not doing this again.
Okay, yeah. No, I understand that you could also look at it from the angle of it's like a little too generalized. Like, what does it really do to make itself like?
Maybe it spread itself too thinly across all of those. Maybe that's what I felt about it. It you know, in trying to like homogenize itself across every adaptation of Spider-Man ever, it didn't have its own identity. That's how I felt.
So it what you're saying is that it tried to please every type of Spider-Man fan, because there's like a weird like just there's tribes and like cults of different like subsections of the Spider-Man fandom.
And I don't know who you're talking about.
But like, it's funny how it managed to piss off none of them and kind of like leave all of them going, hey, yeah, that was pretty good. But at the same time, like, is there really just someone who's just a fan of just the PS4 game? Like, now that I'm thinking about it, like, it doesn't really do anything like new enough to be it like someone's first like and only exposure to the character. Like, oh, this is the take that I like. Like, it's really just every take at once. Like,
that's something that really puzzled me, is that, if I can spoil it, I'm pretty sure everyone on the planet has played it at this point, or everyone listening to this at least, is when I said that it was too familiar and it didn't take enough risks, people criticized it and was like, what are you talking about? The Aunt May death, that's a huge risk. But that Aunt May death only works as an emotional beat if you have like a predisposition to their relationship, because their relationship isn't explored that much.
Oh no, it's like she's in. I agree with you 100% on that. I even really started to think about that. Is like she's in like maybe 10 minutes of that game, and that game is like.
So you already need to be
long.
familiar with Peter Parker and his origin, and which everybody is, of course, but. That's my counter argument to that being a new shocking thing, because all that really is that that relies on banked knowledge that we already have.
So that gut punch really only works is if you're attached to just one of the like 50 different visions of Aunt May. But really, like, if you had no idea about her before, like, or any of this, would you be really attached to that one though?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I totally see where you're going with that. And I guess that's the opposite end of the spectrum, is that like you got games that are so heavy MCU inspired because they're trying to please a very specific subset of fans, which happens to just have the largest pool of people. Because like I think between all of the Marvel properties, the stuff that gets the most people like, you know, spending money on it is the films. So, but then like that one tries to take it a step further by just pleasing like everybody, to the point that it maybe kind of shoots itself in the foot a little regarding something. So like as a standalone thing, it really doesn't work, but as like a piece of a very big franchise of games, or just a bigger franchise of a character as a whole, it works pretty well.
Yeah.
So,
I don't think that game would have the same emotional impact in isolation, you know, like disconnected from everything else we know about Spider-Man. And in some ways that could be seen as, okay, well, that's great because it's a celebration to all those things, and it's a love letter to all those things. And that's really how a lot of the reviews were pitched. This is a love letter to all things Spider-Man. This is the fucking Spider-Man movie that we need, and all this bullshit. But
shout out to Alex.
but my argument is that that was, you know, no hate there at all. But my take on that is that, like, well, then it doesn't stand on its own merit. And I think that there are absolutely Spider-Man games in the past that stand on their own merit. Ultimate Spider-Man stands on its own merit. Spider-Man 2000 stands on its own merit. You don't need...
No, yeah. Like
you don't need to have seen all the Raimi films to appreciate Spider-Man 2000.
Exactly. You know, I think what I was trying to go for, too, was I wanted to make both of our thesis statements for both of our respective reviews of the game, like, both correct, because I think both of them are. Is that, like, your stance is that it's trying to appease to too many things at once and doesn't really stand as its own thing. But my stance is that it does just such an amazing job of being everywhere at once. In my opinion, I think it just does enough to please all of the different like subsections of the fandom that it does feel like a pretty strong love letter to the character. But I absolutely agree, in a vacuum, if you just did not care at all about Spider-Man, it just had no idea like who or what that was even about, it just wouldn't have the same kind of impact or draw.
Yeah. And I don't want to keep talking about this because we're beating a dead horse, but
yeah.
The one thing that's baffled me to this day is that everything that people have been giving Dan Slott for 10 years, and, you know what I mean, harassing him on Twitter, they all fucking creamed their jeans over this game for all those same elements, I feel.
I think it has to do with execution.
Yeah, and it's a tighter, you know, it's a more compact and
it's
linear.
Any idea can be told well. Any idea can be awesome if you just have a strong enough writer on it. And I think Dan Slott, one of his strengths is that he can come up with some really wacky, crazy, out there ideas. I just think he ultimately doesn't really know how to pull them off. And in like 99% of his cases, he'll come up with a really cool idea and then get like scared that it's not going to work out and then backpedal it like shortly after. Like he gave Spider-Man a sidekick recently that he had for like 20 issues. And no, I can guarantee you no one remembers that character's name anymore, even though it was like 3 years ago. Or like Parker Industries is going to be an obscure did you know fact in 20 years. Like that is going to have no impact at all. You know?
Yeah, I kind of always got the sense that he was thinking too far ahead and treading water until he got to the, you know, the payoff kind of thing.
He didn't really think about how that's going to work for now. I think of it as a different thing. I think he focuses too much on what's going to be like a big headline or what's going to sell a lot of books right now. But then in terms of like how is that story decision going to work 2 or 3 years from now? He doesn't really think about that. So by virtue of not having a long-term plan, he has to undo it.
Yeah. I can't believe we're talking about this.
Guardians of the Galaxy, everyone.
To contribute my 2 cents to this conversation, in retrospect, listening to you guys' argument about Spider-Man PS4, I used to kind of bitch about like why such a bland basic title, just calling it Marvel Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, yeah.
But now listening to you guys' argument, I guess it kind of makes sense. Him being this version of the character that pulls from everything, where they're not going to add a subtitle to kind of identify it as their own, but more as a celebration of the character as a whole. So I guess maybe calling it Marvel Spider-Man makes sense now.
You know what? I didn't even think about that, but you're totally right.
Yeah, and everything, like the cover art, everything is just like, what's the most generalized version of this we can possibly create that appeals to absolutely every single person.
Like the only thing that gives it its own like identity visually is the costume, but even that, if you want him to, it's only necessary to wear for 2 cutscenes, and they last like for 30 seconds.
I found that oddly strange that they gave you such freedom when it comes to switching the costume whenever you want.
I think that's refreshing, and I want all games to just do that. You know what? Here's an even better example is the Resident Evil 2 remake. It gives you all these different costumes, and you can just change them in the pause menu, and all of them are in all of the cutscenes, and it doesn't have any restrictions at all. Like even if it's like an emotional moment in the story, you can fuck it up by being PS1 Leon.
Yeah.
So like Spider-Man PS4 was like maybe a step below that, where it's like, okay, we don't want you wearing the Ghost Spider outfit or the Spidey Whitey's the underwear suit during the Aunt May death scene. I kind of hope that's like the norm for games now. Like I if there's anything that I hope Spider-Man contributed, I hope it's that alternate skins are just like numerous and plentiful. Like that becomes the expectation, is that there's just going to be a lot of them, and that they won't put a lot of annoying restrictions on which ones you can wear and when. Because like if there's anything that's really just super fun and memorable about that game, it's just that like you get every costume except for like 3, and all of those might have story relevance in the sequel, so it makes sense. Like isn't that just one of the most fun things to play with in a video game, is just alternate costumes? Like am I being like crazy by having an expectation that there should just be a lot of those from now on? Like is it
the only thing better is the model swap that you can do in games like Metal Gear Solid, where you can swap out the character for another character in the game and play out the cutscene differently like that.
Oh my god, you know what? I remember in Uncharted 2, you can swap out the character models, and on my second playthrough of that game, I could not decide which skeleton I wanted to be or which female character I wanted to be, because it was either, well, okay, it's funny when the skeleton does like the slapstick comedy bits that are in there sometimes, or like falls off of things, or like gets punched because it's a skeleton. But then I wanted to recreate that Mary Jane problem from the 2002 Spider-Man game.
Oh, right.
I was looking for a scene where Nathan Drake can kiss another character, so I could have that character kiss themselves, maybe. And it was back in the era when the cutscenes were like a pre-rendered thing outside of the gameplay.
Yeah.
So it would transition back to normal Nathan Drake for those parts, and I was so sad.
My first playthrough of Arkham Knight, and the reason why I think I enjoyed this game a lot more than most people, is I did the entire thing as Adam West. And just watching him pop up out of a grate and just fear take down 5 guys, it was just incredible.
Just all those like really, or that dark, angry speech at the end where he talks about like why he doesn't need the Joker anymore. He's like strangling him while going, "I am the Knight," but as Adam West.
Exactly. And just imagining the big like pow coming up.
I'm sad that no one or maybe they did, and I just haven't seen it. But did anyone end up modding that in? Is the punch sound effects thing? Like, how badly would that screw up the free flow combat? That's to just have a cutaway screen, or just have it be like an effect that pops up on the screen, like you hit someone and it just like appears over your fist as a pow or a boof or whatever.
Yeah, that's got to be out there.
Get the scene where Barbara Gordon gets shot, and then the
bam,
the bat signal.
Oh no! Oh man,
I've not painted myself in a good light in this conversation.
That is like the worst thing you've ever said to me in this podcast, and I want it so bad. I want to edit that. Is like. I want to go back to like the Killing Joke animated movie and put that transition in a bunch of spots just to see like Bruce and Barbara on the rooftop, and then that transition. Just like hard cuts to her just having coffee on a couch.
Oh no.
Good. I've tried to keep a squeaky clean image in my YouTube career.
No, dude, let it out, man. Let it out. Let me okay, so let's jump back to some of these Guardian tweets.
Yeah. What a tangent that was. We haven't talked about Guardians for like 30 minutes.
This comes from at Spidermat88. He says, I think if Telltale were still around and the other one wasn't so bad, I think the team behind Tales from the Borderlands can make a pretty good Guardians of the Galaxy game. I think there'd be a pretty good fit in terms of tone. You know, if they wanted to match the MCU version, the humor and tone of Borderlands would definitely fit Guardians pretty well.
You know, that's like the only really kind of semi-recent Telltale game other than the Batman one that I've actually played.
I heard it's really good. One of the better ones, actually.
Is like probably the height of what Telltale games can do.
Really?
Because like it just felt like the decisions actually had like an effect on things, and that's kind of it's sad that that's not the norm. But well, for one, the characters were almost all original characters. Like it was just it was using an original and established IP, but it was like, all right, here's just we're not going to rely very much on like any of the ones from the main games except for the villain.
Right.
We're just going to create an entirely new cast of characters that you can get super attached to and like, develop a lot of like feelings for, so that,
they're not restricted.
To the point that you almost want to see them show up in the actual Borderlands games, because you just think they're just so charming and cool in their own right, even though they kind of wouldn't fit because none of them are really like combat people. But then like something else it did is just it told such a cool story within that universe that really felt like it actually mattered. Like what happens in Tales from the Borderlands should and could potentially have like major consequences and effects on like the entirety of that game's universe. And you just don't get that from like the Walking Dead game. Is that like whatever is going on with Clementine is completely fucking irrelevant to everything else in that entire franchise. And you can feel that after like the first 20 minutes. Because like all of the characters from actual Walking Dead in season 1 of that game basically just go, all right, I got to go back to the main story. Bye. And just like leave.
That's actually a really cool concept in regards to Tales from the Borderland, where like you got the mainline games of, first person shooters. And then you got this spin-off Telltale game. How cool would it be to have like a save file that's connected? I mean, when the next game comes out, the choices you made in the Telltale game, you take that save file, and they'd affect the world in the first person shooter game.
Yeah, well, because like basically like the big bad guy corporation that like most of the story is based around Like you have the option in the Telltale game to just completely like blow them up. Like they're just gone forever. Like you can make their space station fall out of the sky. And like it just has such far-reaching consequences that I understand why the next Borderlands game was a prequel after that. Because it's like, well, hold on, we got a lot to figure out now, because that changed like a lot. So that's just something that's like, I mean, it's the same kind of gameplay and same kind of presentation. It's just that one little thing is just that it actually has decisions that seem like they matter, that ironically, in a game that's supposed to be about that, feels very fresh.
Yeah, I gotta play Tales from the Borderlands. I've had it in my library for the longest.
Definitely find a way to turn it. Find a way to get a copy of that, or just don't watch a Let's Play, because
no, I have it. I think it was a PS Plus game, so I already have it in my library of games on PlayStation.
Okay, yeah.
I just gotta download it.
All right.
Yeah, there's been so many of the Telltale games that have been PS Plus games. Then they're just like all in my library, and it's like, oh, one day I'll just binge through all these.
I mean, does that Game of Thrones game have any merit to it?
I think that's the worst one I hear.
Really? That's awesome. What a weird reaction. I'm sorry. It's just when I hear that kind of stuff.
This comes from Super Swim Team 7 on Twitter. He says there has to be at least one fight against a giant space creature, like a Celestial or Galactus.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah. No, there's so many cool big like enemies that are kind of underutilized. Like, I mean, the Celestials are like, I mean, they dwarf even Galactus. Like, the whole point of them is that like they're like 10 Godzillas like stacked on top of each other. So I think some of my like favorite boss fights in video game history are ones where it's like you're this tiny human-sized character and you have to go like, there's Godzilla over there, go take him down.
Yeah.
Like, in your Kratos, so you got to just start hacking at his legs and you'll get him eventually. Just keep at it.
This made me think, and I think Mass Effect did something like this, but when we brought up going to different planets and settlements throughout, being in a good standing with the native people from that planet, how about, and I think Mass Effect did this, but how about at the end, like the final boss or whatever, you're about to face off maybe in some sort of space battle in your ship or something, to go against something like a Celestial or Galactus, but depending on your standing with all the people you've come across throughout your journey, they'll back you up for the battle and maybe give you some backup with their own fleet of ships to help you out during the boss fight.
Yeah, that was something kind of cool about Mass Effect 3 is like everything that happened in that game led up to how many people you had with you during like the final confrontation. Like, it didn't ultimately matter. I mean, you still get the same ending no matter what, but the idea was there.
Yeah. This is from @ThunderBuddy31. He says an open world game with switching protagonists and gameplay styles, with missions with all guardians and missions with singular ones. So I think kind of what we were saying before with having Rocket be more puzzle based, maybe going through vents, Groot being more like Drax, Kratos style gameplay, Gamora, maybe you could have stealth missions, that kind of thing. At Artemis Morgan 11 says manual flying / driving, switching between third person and first person. And Agent Venom, obviously.
Oh yeah, that's actually the only really Guardian stories I've read. I want to be up to date on Venom because I like that character so much. So I was just like, all right, I guess I'll read this Guardians run since he's in it.
I wasn't aware of that one. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was written by Bendis, so it came up with this like massive retcon to like a major portion of the history of the symbiotes. Like, just completely changed the game on them and like totally reoriented what they were supposed to be and contradicted maybe like 1,000 books before it.
Yeah, there's been a lot of rework on the origins of the symbiotes. Like, isn't Deadpool tied to like the symbiote
that one is non-canon so far as I know. That one's non-canon, but the writer of it keeps trying to make it canon by like hinting at it in like other stuff. But I don't think Marvel editorial will let him, and I'm glad because that's kind of a stupid thing to throw in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that meant that Donny Cates in his Venom run had to come in and just like completely undo all of that Guardians thing that they came up with, because he was like, well, that like makes the symbiotes infinitely less scary and less interesting. What Bendis did. So he's like, oh, hold on, I'm not using that.
Yeah, I really like that run. It's still going on, right? There are more issues going on.
No, that Venom run is like not slowing down anytime soon. Like,
yeah,
they just dropped a pretty big bombshell in that most recent issue, and I'm a little mad because I kind of spotted it like a billion miles away. And I actually was one of the first people to go, oh, I bet that's what's going to happen. And a lot of people were like, no, they won't go for that. And then they did.
This comes from @CrackBandicoot. Crack Bandicoot, I like that one.
Man, what am I, 5 years old? Why am I laughing so hard at that?
Let's pitch that game.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. That's why he's spinning.
That's that crazy look in his eye. He says,
snorting. I'm sorry.
He says the game Star Wars 1313 should have been. Mm-hmm. Kind of like that Uncharted, but in space kind of thing. I mean, I can picture
like
if the Guardians game, if the Guardians game was just okay, it's your Peter Quill. It's a linear third-person cover-based shooter. None of this like RPG, Mass Effect kind of stuff. I can picture the Guardians game pretty much just being that.
So you'd have all these other cool characters on your team that you can't really play as, or if you do, they just like play really similarly.
Either that, or they're just like a supporting cast for story like narrative reasons. Not exactly not gameplay
like
stuff.
Gamora is just the Elena, or like Groot is your Sully.
Yeah.
I want like an emotional storyline about like Peter Quill realizing that Groot is a father figure to him. And, like, we get a big fake out on his death, like right near the end of the third game, and then they kind of wuss out of it.
Just picturing Groot chomping a cigar for the whole time.
Nice.
Goddamn, I'm Groot.
This comes from @JJ and 827. Kind of like Red Dead 2 type of thing, but more refined for each character. So that's kind of a neat idea. That whole, you're going out doing these missions and you're contributing to your own gang, trying to, support them by bringing back money and supplies. And it's got kind of that whole vibe where you're just this ragtag and you're trekking along and just trying to survive.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Red Dead 2 influences games like these going forward, because that did that storytelling so well in such a natural way, and having, like we were talking earlier, those interpersonal relationships and stuff like that, and the kind of busy work. At no point in Red Dead do you feel like you're doing busy work, even though you're doing the same stuff you've done in every other video game.
I know for sure the biggest influence that Red Dead is going to have for like the moment is every game right now is going, shit, we got to put a lot more minor animations of like characters picking up stuff.
Super slow ones.
We got to have it really look like whatever character in The Last of Us you're playing as actually picks it up, not just they hover their hand near it and then it just kind of clicks in.
Yeah, I gotta say, I mean, as slow as in some people think it was clunky, it was satisfying, like actually picking up a body, patting it down, and like loading the object, whatever it was. Like there was actual physics to it.
I could see why that had like kind of a big effect. It's just because like, has any game really put that much work into that before? I think it's kind of a neat gimmick, but after a while, if every game is doing it, it might get a little irritating.
Yeah, and it's weird for me that kind of stuff doesn't really affect immersion. Although Red Dead 2 is like the most incredibly immersive game ever.
You can smell that game.
Yeah. But there's so much more at play there. You know, it's greater than the sum of its parts. Whereas if the takeaway was for every game to go, oh, well, it needs to be, you know what I mean? This kind of realism, this obsession with realism in video games, I think can be reductive.
No, yeah, I totally get you. I mean,
I think that's the problem with any art medium, is just like the closer to realism, the less like fun. Like look at a movie like Spider-Verse. It goes as far from realism as possible, and that's why it's memorable and interesting.
Yeah,
you know, like not everything.
I've never agreed with anything more.
Yeah, like not everything has to be hyper realistic. Like, oh, you can see the pores on his nose in that texture. Like all that stuff looks cool right now, but I feel like 20 years down the line, when everything, like the technology has evolved as such that everything can be that realistic, it's just not going to be impressive anymore.
Yeah, it's going to look like the B movie.
Yeah, like there's a lot of stuff that ages really well from being stylized. Like we were talking before the show started, is that Resident Evil 2 remake, or not Resident Evil 2, the original Resident Evil remake. Even though it doesn't look, you know, super realistic, the graphics just held up like weirdly well. I mean, it's a game from 2002 and it still looks like current gen on like 2019. So stylization, I think, can help a game age like more gracefully than if you look at a game that's going for like hyper realism, like Halo 3. Some of the character models in that are so like polygonal around the edges. Like the textures are great. Some characters have like hexagons for heads. Weird.
You're telling me Resident Evil remake came out 2 years after Spider-Man on the PS1?
Yes.
That blew my goddamn mind.
Yeah, I heard you go wow when I said that.
Yeah.
have you played that remake at all, or at least just like
no? Yeah, I played it when it first came out, and I played it on when they put it on the PlayStation 4.
It's kind of scary. Like all they really did was just put it in widescreen.
Yeah,
all the art assets are pretty much exactly how they were.
Those backgrounds, and like I said, like they didn't get super ambitious with the character models that, you know, and that's the reason that they held up so well.
They look realistic enough to be believable, but not like going too far to the point that it like wouldn't age.
Yeah.
Like that other example of Halo 3. Well, I mean, you can have everything look really good when the background is a JPEG.
Yeah.
Like that's really what this whole game is just like,
it's a big picture.
It's a picture that like, well, they try to trick you by having the camera like float and move a little bit just to not give the effect that it's like stuck. But like, it's really just a bunch of layers of pictures that you're walking around. Like there's no, I'm playing it right now. This whole podcast, I've been playing that game. And it just feels like you're running in and out of layers of like a Photoshop file. It's just like, the wall texture 3 is ahead of me, but floor texture 2 is underneath of me.
It's something. This is from Winter_Jabari. You guys should use the space exploration like Mass Effect, but make some Ratchet and Clank elements, like when you land on a planet and see everyone leave the ship. I think that's like what you brought up earlier, Josh, when you got the different hub worlds that you drop into.
I played all of the reboot Ratchet and Clank game, just role playing it as Rocket and Groot, because you totally get the same, you know, sense of the, you know, as I was saying, the kind of galaxy hopping space adventure.
Yeah, you got a little guy with a big ass gun.
Yeah, and you know, we talked about this earlier, but the kind of, you have the Clank puzzle sections, and I can totally see a mechanic like that working for Groot.
Totally.
Yeah.
This is from @Studio0612, team-focused action adventure with tons of exploration and replay value. Okay, this comes from Cyberbolt21. I think maybe a Mass Effect style RPG could fit Guardian with hubs and planets to explore and getting some bounties as well. And maybe recruiting other cosmic Marvel characters like Silver Surfer and the Cosmic Ghost Rider.
That would be cool. It's just like you could maybe build your own Guardians team. Like maybe it doesn't have to be the guys just from the MCU movie. Maybe just like those are some of the defaults that are already there, because you get in like your standard Mass Effect, you get a couple of characters who are just like already on the team no matter what, like they're freebies. But it'd be cool is like, hey, who'd be a badass on this team? Let's get Beta Ray Bill. we even have like a little space on the ship for him to hang out, like his own little room there.
Yeah, that would be really cool, because how the in the comics it's not exactly the same team, or at least in the older comics of Guardians. It's like a totally different team from the one we see in the MCU, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's the one. The MCU movie was kind of like, I think, I could be wrong on this, don't quote me on this, but I think what they were trying to do near the end was set up that the original Guardians team, like the original lineup, would show up, and that's Sylvester Stallone and all those other schmucks that were there. I think the idea was that they wanted to have the original lineup be those guys, and they could be like kind of some additional characters to show up for fun in the sequel.
Yeah, you also had the Guardians 3000 team, and there have been like other members on the main team during. You said about Agent Venom. Iron Man was a member at some point. Mantis, Cosmo, all of these.
Yeah. Iron Ninja 2000 says anything but the Telltale game. This one's interesting. This comes from I never learned how to pronounce Sion Prime 1. I think he's in the.
I've been saying Cian.
Cian. Yeah.
If you're in the chat right now, please tell us how we're sound it out phonetically.
He says a Guardians game in the style of the canceled Prey 2. My God, that game looks so good. You guys have seen the original Prey 2 before it got rebooted? And
I haven't. I've heard people talk about that before. Like what can you describe it a little for us in the dark?
It's first person, kind of think of Cyberpunk a little bit, but with some Mirror's Edge style platforming and parkour. And it was going to be heavily based on getting bounties. So, going out into the open world and like these really like heavily populated like slums, kind of like something you see out of Blade Runner or Star Wars, and you're just running through crowds of people trying to catch your bounty, and you either kill them or turn them in. And yeah, it just looked really cool. The aesthetic was the thing that popped out at me the most, and some really cool gadgets they showed off. I mean, I don't know if it was an actual gameplay demo or just kind of like a pre-rendered thing, but if it was representative of the final game, it could have been something really cool. This comes from @thegameshow UK, Game Show Maddie. Says real-time switching between the Guardians a la Lost Vikings, Rollo to the Rescue, Cameo, etc. Each Guardian has specific abilities which need to be used to accomplish certain tasks. Cameo, that's that early Xbox 360 game, right?
I'm not familiar. I don't think I've heard of that one.
No, those are some obscure.
Yeah, I think Cameo is the only one I've heard of.
Okay.
Don't know about those other ones. This comes from Leo Wild, who's like a huge Rocket Raccoon fan. Open world exploration, action, combat RPG, but you should be able to choose who to play whenever you want. You have to play this character in this section and this character in this section. Maybe you should find new Guardians, expand the roster. Yeah, like how we were just discussing a minute ago.
Yeah. Back in the day on one of my favorite games, Marvel Superheroes in War of the Gems on the SNES, depending on which character you chose, you could find different routes through the level because, Iron Man would have like a boost jump and things like that.
Oh, it's kind of like the Yep.
Well, I was going to say that that's something that isn't really that works better in a 2D side scroller, but that's something that hasn't really translated to 3D games.
Yeah, because
having a new route that
it would have to be right. It would have to be a little bit like smaller levels to be able to want to revisit maybe with a different character. I know Curse of the Moon, is it the Castlevania style
oh yeah
game? They did something kind of like that, but in that you can switch on the fly between characters and going through those alternate routes. It's a little easier since you can switch right there on the spot. But yeah, I mean that could be interesting. This comes from written by Brando. He says, "I want KOTOR, but with extended Guardians team as party members, and you go to all sorts of different planets and have big RPG battles."
Yeah, I think that idea of build your own Guardians team has potential. There's kind of something there because like that could be a way to utilize the fact that like team rosters on superhero games are just so wildly inconsistent.
Like, do you think if we can introduce all these different characters that may or may not have different abilities from the Guardians that we're more familiar with now from the MCU, do you think we could run into the problem where we might not be able to keep it as a third-person shooter? Are we going to run into like a Marvel Ultimate Alliance kind of situation where we kind of have to have this combat system that could fit, you could plug in any character that you come across?
I think there's a delicate balance. Okay, like let's look at a game like Overwatch. Not every character plays exactly the same. Like it's all a first-person shooter, sure, but every character is specialized enough that they feel very different, and like their gameplay is very unique to them, and like has a little bit of something for everybody. So you can do a big roster of characters like that with little gimmicks to distinguish them and make them look unique and feel different to play. But it depends on the number. You can have it be too much, or you could I guess the less the better is the thing, is because then you could like really focus on more of them. Like when we were talking about 4 characters earlier, you could have the gameplay for all 4 of them be like wildly different. But if you have something like 10 or 12 characters, you can't quite have that much fun with it.
Thinking of Agent Venom, man, he'd be perfect for a third-person shooter.
Oh yeah, right. Like just think of all the. I mean, you could have all kinds of really cool melee attacks, or you can maybe, use the webs for traversal. Like imagine PS4 Spider-Man if he had like Uncharted shooting. Like you could swing around, but then also just stop, hide behind cover, and then snipe someone.
Dude, I'd love to swing around while just spraying with an M16.
Oh yeah, like if you could like fire in midair, like if they could figure out some kind of mechanic for gunplay while swinging.
Yeah.
Shit, let's just pitch a Agent Venom game. That sounds like a million times cooler than all this other stuff. Just give a Spider-Man character a gun.
Yeah.
There's a whole new game right there.
Any last minute thoughts on what should be in the Guardians game?
I'm really trying to think of what else you can do. I mean, I think we've covered pretty much everything.
Yes, so I think the general idea is have a Mass Effect style open world, but not really open world game with planets as hub worlds to do different side quests or bounties. Maybe.
I do just want to say We've discussed like 3 or 4 different kinds of games in here so far. Actually, maybe even more than that, and I'm not just not remembering. I think somewhere in this conversation we described whatever Guardians game, if there is one coming out. I think we've already described what it is somewhere in all of this conversation. Maybe not all at the same time, but whatever it's going to be, I think we've probably covered it somehow in here, because it's not going to be one of those games that like completely reinvents gaming and comes up with something new. It's just it's going to be a brand tie-in that fits some kind of, I'm not going to say generic, but a familiar play style.
I mean, I'm trying to picture it. It's Eidos Montreal is the developer, right? And Square Enix is the publisher. What games has Eidos Montreal made? Are they the ones? Did they make Deus Ex? Or was it also Tomb Raider?
Don't worry, I'm the Googleman.
They did Deus Ex, and I believe, if I remember correctly,
okay.
I've not Googled that. You go for it. Give me more.
Okay. They also did the 2013 Tomb Raider. And
Eidos Montreal and Crystal Dynamics kind of support each other, as I understand it. And Eidos Montreal are supporting on Avengers Project, and Crystal Dynamics were reportedly supporting on Guardians.
Yeah. So that's really all they've done is just Deus Ex, and they did Thief in 2014.
Oof.
Which I've heard people criticize as not living up to whatever series that was a part of.
Yeah. I mean, I could definitely picture it more as a Tomb Raider-like game with the third-person shooty game style, and even Tomb Raider, it's got like these hub worlds kind of with collectibles and different side missions as well.
Man, that whole Tomb Raider thing is kind of funny to me because, like, have either of you played Tomb Raider Legend?
Is that the one that's like a remake kind of the original?
No, that one's Tomb Raider Anniversary, I believe. But it has the same gameplay as Legend. Like, it's basically just an expansion for it with Tomb Raider 1's story. But, like, Tomb Raider Legend came up with a lot of really cool gameplay mechanics and, like, a lot of stuff that I would say is kind of ahead of its time. And then Uncharted came out and used like pretty much I would say not even all of it, maybe actually like 80% of it, and then nothing else that was really particularly new, and then got praised for being like the most new thing in the universe. And then later on, the Tomb Raider series just started having to ape off of Uncharted. So it's just like how kind of weird how those two things have sort of homogenized into each other.
Yeah, I've always said that.
Oh, it's my cat. I've heard your cat squeak in the background once or twice too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's Pet Owners Unite.
So the conclusion we've come to anyway is that BioWare should not have made Anthem and should have made a Guardians game instead.
I think so, yeah. I think
Actually,
so.
Did you hear about that news today about Anthem too? Is that apparently he has some kind of glitch that breaks the game so bad that it like makes people's PS4s just stop functioning.
Oh no.
Like it just kills the whole system.
I won't be getting that game.
So you mean to tell me that BioWare was lazy about it? Call back.
So yeah, I guess that was our pitch or like 3 or 4 different pitches of what the Guardians game can possibly be.
Plus a long kind of depressing
right.
how like brands eventually just shrivel up and die under their own popularity.
Yeah, if I wasn't off the Insomniac Christmas card list, I am now.
So I guess like one more question before we close it off. Is this game happening?
I'm gonna give it a no. I feel like maybe right now with all the James Gunn stuff happening and the fact that like the third one is like really uncertain, I'm gonna say that the brand has kind of missed its like golden opportunity. I would say like just before Guardians 2 is when this game should have came out, because that one wasn't received as like well as the first, so that also might have affected it. So like it should have rode off the hype of the first one, but not quite like had to live in the shadow of the like meh of the second one. But now it's gonna have to also live in that weird zone of like controversy surrounding the films and like uncertain future. Like, oh my, I'm sorry, my cat. He really wants to be involved in this. But no, yeah, I think that they kind of missed their opportunity. So I'm going to say that that's going to be one of those projects that gets announced and then they just quietly stop talking about it. They're going to pull a DC on it.
Yeah. What about you, Josh? You think it's happening?
I would imagine that it's still in early development and that it'll continue to go forward. But what will set its kind of fate will be the Avengers project and how that's perceived. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're, linked, as we said, in terms of story, but also in terms of gameplay. We haven't really talked about games as a service here, but that would, to me, work a lot better for Guardians than for the Avengers.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the only thing that's ever got me close to playing Destiny was that it's vaguely like space piratey and kind of Guardiansy.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it might not. I don't think it's gonna happen because the fact that it's been announced so long ago and the Avengers project as well, and we really haven't gotten any new significant information. So I'm imagining that game is still long a ways off. And I think there was a recent tweet that it might be a next gen title, and that game is still so far away that the Guardians game is nowhere near.
Well, because like even as far away as the Avengers one is, and how like little information they're giving about it, they're still giving information. Like it's a known fact that it's being worked on. There's progress being made.
Well, and with all that, it's still far away. So just imagine how much further away this Guardians game is.
Exactly. It's like it's not even funny how like little they've talked about that. Like, can you imagine being the guy who built the Twitter account to hype up that one instead of the Avengers one? Like, at least the Avengers guy has hope.
I hope there's a Guardians guy out there.
Let's go look for that after the show. Let's find the Twitter account. Have we heard anything about the Guardians of the Galaxy game? And that guy's just offline since like 6 weeks ago. Just not even checking it anymore. The last couple of tweets are just really depressing.
I love how often the Avengers project guy has come up in the podcast.
I think that guy's great. I that's the subplot for this podcast, is that this developing story about the guy who has the hype account that was like, for like a brief couple of weeks, everyone thought was going to be like the start of a new Spidey squad, but then 2 years passed and it's just like, well, that didn't work out. And I want him to succeed. I'm rooting for him so hard. I want that guy to get a trailer or something. I want to see the excitement in his eyes.
This is lore.
Yeah.
He's the real hero of this podcast.
Man, he's the one who's really saving the day.
Yeah.
Let's have that guy on.
Yeah. Let's just have that guy on and ask him if we've heard anything about it.
All right, we'll see you next week.
All right, see you around.
All right, so that was our Guardians of the Galaxy game pitch. If you have any more ideas to toss to this game, you could post them down in the comments below. And Josh, you brought up something last week. I mean, I'm not sure if you're like ready for it right now or anything, but for the next episode to pose a question to our viewers or listeners.
Put me on the spot here.
Yeah, I'm totally.
I've got to come up with a question.
I mean, you don't have to do it right now, but
no, I mean that's a good. We want some listener mail. So let's say I don't know, something to do with Guardians of the Galaxy. Do you think it's going to happen?
Yeah,
that's a good question. Write in, tell us.
Right in. Is Guardians of the Galaxy the game happening? And we'll see what the consensus is. But till then, we'll see you guys next time. Thank you.
All right. See you around.
See ya.